Hello, and thank you for taking the time to view this presentation. My name is Chris Holmes, and I'm going to discuss some recent work in which extensive data sets on agricultural parcels and surface water in France were used to characterize field proximity at various distances and for different scales of reporting. First, I'd like to acknowledge the co-authors on this study, and you can see their names and affiliations here. Regulatory exposure modeling for pesticides relies heavily on hypothetical scenarios to accommodate landscape variability across large extents. Proximity is an important factor to potential aquatic exposure from agricultural applications of pesticides. In characterizing proximity in total, as opposed to just selected locations, allows for reduced uncertainty regarding where and to what extent off-field pesticide transport might occur. High spatial and temporal resolution cropping and hydrographic data in France provides an opportunity to characterize agricultural proximity across the country and discern regional variations. The two main datasets used for this analysis are related to agricultural parcels and the location of surface water. The Registre Parcellage Graphique, or RPG, is an annual reporting of crop assignment to over 9 million parcels in France to support the Common Agricultural Policy. It lists over 200 individual crops, and in our two separate analyses, one for maize in which we used 800,000 parcels, and one for winter cereals, which we used over 400,000 parcels. For surface water, the BD Topo Spatial Dataset includes hydrology for a number of water body types in point, line, and polygon format. We included 2.7 million line features and almost a million area features in our analysis. Water bodies also have some attributes describing their characteristics, such as whether they're permanent, intermittent, or ephemeral, whether they're natural or man-made, and an indication of width classes for streams, rivers, and canals. Collectively, these data provide extremely high-resolution spatial data across the entirety of France. Our goal was to understand the proportion of agricultural area that might impact surface water via spray drift, based on the distance between agricultural parcel and surface water. We examined specific distances between 10 and 60 meters, and in some cases continuous distances out to 100 meters. The quantification of parcel area potentially impacting surface water was performed in a geographic information system, and as you can expect, based on the size of the datasets, automation and scripting were used to manage the intense spatial processing and post-processing of results. Starting out, we explored three methods of proximity assessment to characterize agricultural area potentially impacting surface water. The first of these, called the binary method, simply includes an entire parcel is impacted if any portion of it is within the proximity zone around water. This would be the greatest amount of crop that could impact surface water and is highly conservative since it includes the entire parcel. The buffer method is the second approach. This approach considers only the portion of the parcel that directly overlaps with the proximity zone around surface water, regardless of parcel size. You might think of this as being on the other end of the continuum and being least conservative approach. You can see the difference in parcel area selected in the dark orange on the right-hand side compared to the binary method. Perhaps more interesting is the threshold method, which is a combination of the binary and buffer methods. In this approach, a specific threshold is specified, and this threshold represents the portion of a field that must be within the proximity zone for the entire field to be considered impacted. So for a given threshold, say 25%, if 25% or more of the parcel is within the proximity distance to water, the entire parcel is included. In other words, the binary method. However, if less than 25% of the parcel is within the proximity distance, only that portion directly within the proximity zone is included. The buffer method. For a given landscape configuration and proximity distance, in the map on the left, a 25% threshold might select all the parcels, both complete and partial, is shown in the dark orange in the upper right-hand map. But if a 50% threshold is used, several portions of the parcels, here marked with stars, would no longer be included in the impacted area. These maps summarize the total parcel area in the maize and winter cereal analysis and shows this in the region level. The values are the percentage of the entire maize or cereals area in France contained within each region. Dominant cropping areas are different for maize and winter cereals, although each region has at least a very small portion of each. Regions were also used to subdivide the spatial processing to allow for more efficient analysis. The binary method results are presented in a cumulative distribution of total crop area on the y-axis and proximity distance on the x-axis, with several selected proximity distances marked. The maize binary method results on the left show that about 35% of the maize area has some portion of the parcel within 10 meters, and about 52% have some portion within 50 meters. About 38% of the maize parcels have no portion within 100 meters. That'd be on the right side of the chart. Comparatively, smaller percentages of winter cereal parcel area are within proximity to surface water. Here, about 23% have some portion within 10 meters and 37% within 50 meters. These charts provide some information on the differences in proximity between crops, although the reasons for this could be many. However, remember that maize and winter cereals tend to be dominant in different parts of the country. Results can also be viewed in smaller spatial units, such as the département level. The buffer method results are specific to each proximity distance and are shown in the two tables here. We can see that when considering only the portion of parcel that's within the 20-meter proximity distance, only 2.9% of the total maize area in France would be considered impacted, and the comparable value for winter cereals is 1.6. As you might expect, these results vary depending on the region being examined, and the bar charts show below how they compare. While the highest values for both crops occur in Provence-Alpes-Côte d'Azur region, labeled FRL in the charts on the far right, the maps show that a very small percentage of either crop is actually grown in that region. However, the Nouvelle-Aquitaine region, FRI, also has a large amount of maize in proximity to surface water, and this region contains about 20% of the maize parcel area in France. In the threshold method, a percent of parcel area is specified to determine if the binary or buffer method will be applied to that parcel. The chart shows the threshold method results for the maize analysis using proximity distances of 20, 30, 50, and 60 meters. The arrow shows that if a 10% threshold is used with a 30% proximity distance, about 20% of the maize parcel area would be impacted. However, if a 25% threshold were applied to the same proximity distance, a little over 8% would be impacted. In fact, the charting of the threshold method results actually contain information about the binary and buffer methods also. The binary method is equivalent to a threshold of 0%, meaning it will be included if any portion of the parcel is within the proximity distance. This is on the left side of the chart. If you recall, about 52% of the maize area has some portion of the parcel within 50 feet. This is the red line in the plot. The buffer method is equivalent to a threshold of 100%. In other words, 100% of the parcel is within the proximity. This is on the right-hand side. The buffer method is the minimum amount of maize impacted by a specific proximity distance, and therefore, the plot doesn't reach 0% impacted on the right side of the x-axis. The table for the buffer method results showed that about 10% of the maize is within 50 meters of the buffer. That's the other end of the red line. So this one approach to visualizing the results can contain quite a bit of information for each proximity distance analyzed. Looking at the threshold method results for both maize and winter cereals on the same scale, we can see that, like the other two methods of reporting, there's consistently less winter cereals within proximity of surface water, regardless of the threshold applied or method used. However, we can also see that the threshold curves decrease much more rapidly with winter cereals than for maize, giving some indication of the spatial distribution of winter cereal parcels as compared to maize. What we've looked at so far has been presented at the scale of the 12 regions in metropolitan France. However, each parcel and water body are attributed with multiple levels of administrative organization, so that the same tabular or charting output can be readily generated at other spatial scales, like département level. And of course, with over 200 crops in the RPG, there are many ways to aggregate or separate specific crops. Now, on the other side of the proximity question, the set of surface water bodies to include in the analysis can be varied. For example, to include only permanent water bodies, exclude rivers wider than 15 meters, or don't include canals and ditches. As I mentioned, due to the very large number of spatial features, numbering in the millions, we had to come up with a way to efficiently apply the processing in a way that wouldn't crash the GIS software. So by chaining functions in models and using a controlled iteration approach, we could process the spatial relationship between millions of features within the GIS. And just like the spatial processing, tabulation of results and visualization couldn't be efficiently performed in a spreadsheet. So Python scripts were developed to read the raw spatial output and generate tables and charts for reporting. We've been able to demonstrate that parcel-level proximity analysis can be performed for large-scale expanses when such data are available, like we have with the RPG and the BD Topo data. With the models and scripts now developed, analysis of other crop types or time periods is quite efficient. And while we haven't shown it here, further refinement of how results are grouped spatially may help in understanding some of the factors relevant to surface water proximity. And this is one of the interest areas now, trying to understand how the anthropogenic and environmental landscape factors may play into surface water proximity results we're seeing. Thank you for your time spent viewing this presentation, and please feel free to ask questions in the Q&A box linked to this presentation on the SETAC website.